Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to our 12 noon Eastern webinar here on 5 steps to more new patients, close more cases, and get paid up front. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. We're probably gonna wait about another minute or so until we can let more participants into the meeting. Count's growing, we've got a good turnout today. And again, you're in the right place, and intentionally your camera and microphone are on mute. So you're here, don't worry about it. If you're not looking up the snuff, it's no problem. Your camera, you're not broadcasting your picture. It's all right, it's okay. And so about another 30 seconds and we'll get started.
That's a much better picture of me.
All right. So welcome to our 12 noon Eastern webinar. We'll get started here in about another 30 seconds. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. You're in the right place. And again, your camera's on mute and so is your microphone. But we do want this to be an interactive program today. So please leave the Q&A feature, use the Q&A feature to ask questions, engage with Jeff and with Teresa. And at the end of the program, we're gonna allocate probably 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions as they come up from our participants. So Jeff and Teresa, I'm gonna get started if that's okay. That way we're not penalizing the people that are on time.
Yeah.
Great. So briefly, Jim Gerson from CareStack. There's 2 sponsors today that are involved in making this happen, which unusual from our normal circumstances. I'm going to do the introduction for Darby Dental because my colleague from Darby could not make it at the last minute. There was an emergency. So Darby is an important partner in helping get educational content to the marketplace. For those of you who work with them or not, or maybe not familiar with them, Darby's been in business over 70 years. And for the entirety of the company, history, their account teams have always been working inside. So what does that mean for your practices as you reopened? First off, they've kept all their employees during the shutdown, so the familiar names and faces are still there. And the beauty is it's one less footprint in your office, right? Practices are talking about, they don't want people coming and going and things of that nature. And Darby's built like that to support the business. So you may have just known them in the past for supplies. What's really exciting about their portfolio is they've gravitated to offer services that really are built around supporting the dental practice in a contemporary style. And Jim Gerson here from CareStack, we're a partner with Darby. And so Jeff, if you want to advance the slides, that's a little bit of background on Darby, are one of our main sponsors for today. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time here on CareStack because you're here for the academic content, but real briefly, we are a 100% cloud-based solution for the complete management of the dental practice. And we typically work with 2 types of clients. The first is the dental practice that wants to offer a contact-free experience for both patients and staff as they reopened and see technologies enabling that and just need some help getting there. The other type of practice is the one that's grown frustrated and aggravated by having a multitude of software subscriptions and being nickeled and dimed to death to run their dental practices. This has caused frustration, fatigue, and in some cases, sleepless nights for the owners. So if you feel like you fall into one of those 2 buckets, do us a favor after the program, hang around. We're gonna show a short demonstration on what case presentation looks like in CareStack. And then if you wanna learn more, go to carestack.com and book a demo. And Jeff, if you could advance one more slide. So from the CareStack perspective, when we talk about case presentation, these are the challenges that we know dental offices face. We were built by a dentist. We were formed out of a 3-location, 70-chair group in Central Florida. So we know the challenges that practitioners face. And we think this is a really relevant topic that Jeff's gonna speak about. And we feel like our technology really can complement what he's speaking about today. So without further ado, enough of the commercial. Now I'm gonna turn it over to Teresa Duncan, who is our moderator and facilitator of this series of programs that we've been delivering over the past several months. So Teresa, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Jim. Welcome back to this webinar series that CareStack and Darby are sponsoring. It's called Getting Back to Full Swing, which is, we're all doing that, right? So what we're doing today is we're going to bring to you Jeff Palmer, who has worked with many offices, I think probably even thousands at this point, of offices on case acceptance. And you all know me as the insurance speaker, the insurance podcaster, I can teach you insurance all day long, but if no one's accepting the treatment, there's a problem. So you do need the other part of it, which is case acceptance. So Jeff Palmer, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Take it away.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Jim. I'm excited to be here. It's good to be back in swing teaching again, because I did have a break from that, as we did from everything else. So I am going to be talking to you today about case acceptance, and I am going to give you the mile high view of case acceptance, like what it looks like from a strategic standpoint. And I'm also going to go down into the weeds and talk about some nitty gritty about what makes case acceptance work. And really it's about how to meet the needs of your patients. This is really what case acceptance is about. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself first, and then we'll get right into the training. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going over the 5 steps of how to close more cases and get paid up front. When you are talking to patients about their treatment, it is really easy to get paid if they want it. And a lot of the offices that I work with would like to be getting paid up front for some, if not all of their treatment, but they just don't know how to do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about the #1 mistake dentists make when presenting treatment and how to fix it. And this is kind of an interesting subject, because when most doctors think about case presentation and case acceptance, they're relying heavily on the front office to do that. And what I do, because I'm not a doctor, I'm an administrator, what I do is I bring the front and the back together, and I go over what everybody's role is in high case acceptance, and the doctor definitely has a role in case acceptance. And I'm going to go over what the #1 mistake is that doctors make and how to fix it. And when you really understand this whole process, you understand how the business works, you really don't have to worry about money. I know that sounds kind of strange, especially in these times, but it's actually quite predictable, and I'm going to lay that out. And if you would like to talk with me personally about your situation and your practice and find out if there's some way that I can help you or how I can train you, we'll go over that at the end. So I've been working with dentists since 1994. I actually started in Chicago working for a company called MGE. And my job back then was to talk to doctors on the phone and help them figure out what was going on with their practice. And then I would sell them some training to fix it. And I worked for a company, MGE, for 15 years. And in that time, I talked with and helped thousands of doctors. I talked with no less than 10,000 doctors on the phone. Everything was done on the phone and in person back then. There was no webinars. And so I really learned how dentistry and healthcare worked, doing that for 15 years. And I traveled with that company from Chicago to Virginia, which is where I am now. And I ended up in Florida. And in 2009, I decided to make a career change. And I called up my father-in-law, who's a dentist. And I said, hey, so I think I want to do something new. What if you and I become partners in your dental practice, and I can come in and do what I've been telling doctors to do for 15 years and see if I can help you turn your practice around, because we both actually wanted to move to Northern Virginia, where we are now. And he was in Erie, Pennsylvania. And if you were around during the financial crisis, you'll recall that in December of 2008, November, December, CareCredit stopped approving everyone. And back in 2006, 7, 8, and 9, the economy was in a high roar. The housing market was good. People were financing a lot of things. And when the CareCredit stopped approving people, that dried up a lot of people getting treatment that was considered elective. And this is what the stock market looked like right there at the bottom. It was not a good position to be in the stock market, and in practice, my father-in-law's practice was struggling because half of his revenue in 2008 came from CareCredit. He was located in a town of 3,000. This is Lake Erie here. This is the city of Erie. and he was located 15 miles south of Erie in a town called McCain, there by the blinking stop sign. It was a 3-operatory practice, and 20% of the population in the Erie County lived at or below the poverty level. And this was not a fancy practice, and it was fee for service. And what I did when I came in there is I just did what I knew how to do, but I'd never actually done it in practice. I was always telling other people what to do. And within 90 days of being in the practice and implementing what it is that I'm going to be going over with you, we basically had the highest monthly collections in the history of the practice, which he started in 1984, within 3 months of being in the practice. Now, that was, you can see the numbers there were going into 100,000. That was actually more than the practice could produce, and it leveled out about doing about $1 million. And eventually we sold that practice and we moved to Northern Virginia because that's where we wanted to go. And in 2014, we bought another practice, and that one's located in Sterling, Virginia, which is where I am now. And Washington, D.C. area is totally different than Erie, Pennsylvania. Looking out my window here, there's about 10 dentists in this complex. There's about 100 dentists within a square mile of where we are in Sterling, Virginia. So completely different marketplace, but implementing the same process, we grew this to be a $1 million practice and more. And this is PPO. We do participate here. And this is where knowing how to deal with insurance and knowing people like Teresa is incredibly valuable, because people here have jobs, they have insurance, and they want to use it. But it doesn't mean that you can't have those patients accept what they need and step outside of their insurance benefits. So in 2019, we bought a second location, and interestingly enough, within a few months of that transition, we basically lost all the patients to another doctor, and we had to rebuild it. And we have rebuilt that practice for the most part. We're exceeding last year's numbers this year, even with the pandemic. So we're doing it in another location. And this whole time, I've actually been coaching clients as well. I go out to offices, I do seminars, and I help doctors and their team implement this system. And I know that the system works, and I hope that you get something out of what it is that I'm going to share with you today, and you can start implementing some form of it in your practice, or at least see where you are and see that you're doing some things really well. So what I want to share with you here is what I call a dental office sales and conversion funnel. Now, just to talk about conversion for a second. So basically what a conversion is when somebody does something that you want them to do. And when you break down any business, it's all about conversions. Now, living here in Northern Virginia, we live in, we're practicing Loudoun County, and Loudoun County has a lot of data centers, and everything that is online is sitting on a server somewhere. And 70% of the internet traffic flows through Northern Virginia here. Why am I telling you this? Well, there's Amazon here, there's Microsoft, there is Apple, everybody, all the tech companies are here. And nowadays, more and more things are moving online. And when you do something online, you're selling something online, it's all about the conversion. So what does that mean? That means when somebody lands on your website, you want them to do something, you want them to buy something. And one of the biggest, baddest online conversion businesses is Amazon. Because Amazon, when you go to their site, you end up buying something, and if you don't buy it now, they're going to keep marketing to you until you do buy it. And they've just made it very easy to convert. Now, every business consists of getting customers, getting patients, and then converting that customer, that prospect, into a sale. So I'm going to break down for you how I see this working in a dental office. When you market, you create leads. those leads come in through either the phone or they come in through web requests. And when those people schedule and they show up, that's a conversion. Now, I work with clients and I will ask them the question when I first set out with them, do you know how many new patients you're getting? And they'll say, yeah, we're getting about 30 a month or 40 a month or 400 a month. I'll say, okay, good. So do you know how many leads you got a month? And they'll be like, no, I don't know that. So it's impossible to know what your conversion rate is on your new patients if you don't know how many leads you're getting, at least a general idea. And it's very difficult to track, but there are ways to track it. Because the first point on the sales and conversion funnel is how many leads do you get and how many new patients do you see? So this is the top of the funnel, right? It's how many leads do you get and how many do you see? And when you see new patients, this is when you do a comprehensive exam. And when you do a comprehensive exam, this is when you're going to diagnose the most treatment. This is why every office likes to see new patients, because the more new patients you do, the more comprehensive exams you do. Now, different doctors, different offices have different ways of treatment planning or presenting treatment. But the thing that we know is that when you present treatment and a patient says yes, that means that you are going to produce that treatment. So ultimately, if you have a production goal of $100,000 a month, let's say, for easy math sake, how much treatment do you need to present in order to produce or collect 100,000? It's pretty safe to say that you need to present more than 100. The only way that you would need to present 100 to make 100 is if your closing rate, your case acceptance rate was 100%. And nobody has a 100% case acceptance rate, right? So the way that we know how much we're going to be producing and collecting in the coming weeks is by tracking how much treatment do we present and how much was accepted. There's a few different ways to do this, which I'm not going to get into, but ultimately what your production and collections will be in the next 4 to 6 weeks is determined by how much treatment you present and get accepted today. And this is how I've set up a dental office sales and conversion funnel. And when you set up something like this and you're tracking this, this will tell you and give you feedback on exactly how you're doing and exactly what part of the funnel you need to improve in order to make your production and collection goal. There is all kinds of technology or lack thereof behind tracking this, meaning if you're using software like CareStack or Open Dental or any of these other practice management softwares, they will give you some of this data. However, there is no software that will tell you how many new patient leads you got. It is very difficult to track accurately how much treatment was accepted. So it is usually some form of using your technology and using a good old spreadsheet or a pen and a paper to be able to track this information. But I can tell you, when you track this information and you pay attention to it and you influence it positively, like I'm going to go over with you, you will be able to predict and make your production and collection goals. So let me get on to the steps that you can implement that will help you to make this a reality. So how can you predict your speed of practice growth? So I created a law because I wanted to have a law. And the law is that it's impossible to collect more than you present in treatment and get accepted. It's impossible to collect more than you present in treatment and get accepted. Now, this idea is very simple, but it's not easy to pay attention to, and it's not easy for a lot of people to grasp. Most doctors, most offices, they're focusing on that production and collection goal, or they're focusing on how many new patients they see. What you should be focusing on, if you want to make that production goal, is how much treatment you're presenting and getting accepted. Because if you pay attention to how much treatment you're presenting and getting accepted, you will know if you are going to make your future production and collection goal. Just because you're getting new patients doesn't mean that those patients are just going to magically sign up for treatment. A lot of times I will hear, oh, well, the marketing's not working, the marketing's horrible, we spent all this money on marketing, mailers don't work, internet doesn't work, Facebook doesn't work. Everything can work, but those marketing avenues do not have a chance if you do not have some type of system internally to help the patient get what it is that they need. So this is what I'm going to go over with you now. So I call this engineered case acceptance because when you engineer something, you're building in steps, and it's something that's stable and predictable. And whenever you engineer something, you always begin with the end in mind. And so when I'm sitting down with a client or I'm looking at my own practices, I always begin with the end in mind of how much do we want to produce? How much do we want to collect? What is the capacity of the office? Meaning, if we have a 4-operatory office with 1 doctor, 1 front desk person, and 1 assistant, that is going to be a different capacity level than a 20-operatory office with 5 doctors and 5 hygienists. It's a different capacity. So the sake of, doing marketing or improving case acceptance or any of these things is all determined by figuring out, first of all, where do we want to go? What are we trying to accomplish here, right? So when we do this, we know, okay, well, how much do we want to produce and collect? Now we can begin to build this system. And the last thing that occurs right before that production occurs is that there's going to be a case presentation and the person is going to say yes. Whether that's the same day treatment, that the person just came in for a limited exam and they had an infected tooth and they're going to stay to get the extraction, or you're going to get them on medication to get the root canal done or the crown done or whatever that is, or you're presenting a full mouth rehab and you are going to present the treatment options, and then you're going to collect the payment, and then you're going to get that person scheduled and they're going to get the treatment over the next year. So the case presentation is actually where we are going to get the financial commitment from the patient. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to work our way backwards. And one of the biggest, simplest things to do to improve your case acceptance is to actually organize what I'm calling a patient handoff. And a patient handoff is when the patient is leaving the clinical area and going to the administrative area to schedule and collect money. And this is something that if you organize correctly, it works seamlessly to create trust in the patient, and it dramatically increases case acceptance. If you do this correctly, the patient will usually accept something, if not everything. They will usually accept something, and they will come back and keep continuing on their treatment plan. Step 3 that we're going to get into is, how does the doctor do an emotionally engaging case presentation? And I'm going to go over how you can help the patient actually own their dental problems so the patient expresses a desire to fix it. And I'm going to go over in that step the #1 mistake that dentists make, or treatment coordinators for that matter, when they're presenting treatment and how to fix it. It's very simple, but it's not easy. But I'm going to go over that with you in step 3. Step 2 is what I call a pre-consultation interview. And this is the secret to breaking down barriers to comprehensive treatment acceptance. I call this a pre-consult interview. Some people call it a pre-treatment interview. But what we are trying to do in this step is we are trying to get into the head and the heart of the patient before we talk about anything clinical, right? When you are selling somebody something, it is not about selling them what you have. Good selling is about giving the patient what they need and want, giving the person what they need and want. And when you give the person what they need and want, you're not selling them, they're buying. And it makes step 5 exponentially easier. So I'm going to go over with you how to do a pre-consult interview and what we're doing pre-COVID and what we're doing post-COVID, right? Because there's different ways to do a pre-consult interview, but the concept is the same. And then in step 1, I'm going to go over with you some tips and tricks on scheduling new patients so that when you're getting these leads, you can convert them into patients in the chair. If you have some type of process, that's excellent. If you don't have a process, you should have one. And you should be looking at, well, how many leads are we getting and how many people are showing up? Because every lead that schedules and shows up makes that return on investment on your marketing even better. So let's start with step 5 here. How do we collect prepayments? Well, a very simple way to collect prepayments is when you're going over the procedure that the patient needs and you're scheduling it, you just say to the patient, so the doctor requires at least a 50% deposit to reserve your time in their schedule. And that's it, right? When you say it this way and the patient has actually said that they want to get the treatment done and you say it with confidence, it's not a problem. 99% of people do not object to this. Now, if you as the person at the front desk have an issue with this, then it's not going to work. However, I can tell you from experience that when the person that's collecting the money does not have an issue with this, it works just fine. And most people don't have an issue with it. The people that have an issue with it, in most instances, never intended on getting that treatment done. Now, in our office, we collect for prepayments on just about every procedure except in extenuating circumstances. And there's a line that I learned in a seminar, a periodontal seminar a few years ago, that the speaker said, firm in principle, flexible in application, right? So you're always having to think with who's in front of you. So if you have a long-standing patient and she's been there for 30 years and she always does what she says she's going to do, are you going to say, well, Mrs. Jones, I know you've been here for 30 years and you always do what you say you're going to do, but we need to collect that prepayment from you to reserve your time in the schedule? That's going to go over like a Led Zeppelin. And that's not what this is about. What this is about is making sure that the people that get in the schedule do what they are scheduled to do. And let's take an example of somebody that comes in that has an infected tooth, and they're a new patient, and they're coming in to get, they just get a limited exam, and you give them antibiotics and the pain medication, and you schedule them for their root canal next week. What's the chance of that person showing up? I mean, 50-50. So if you collect the out-of-pocket, even if they have insurance, half of it, all of it for that appointment, what's the likelihood of them showing up? It's greater than 50-50, I will tell you that, right? So all you need to do is just institute a policy, a procedure where you're just collecting a portion of the out-of-pocket as they are scheduling. It's very easy if they're already getting the work done. You're doing a lot of same-day dentistry. In our offices, it really doesn't work that way. Our schedule is very full. If somebody's coming in, we're going to schedule them to come back in most instances. So this works out really well. It actually increases your cash flow. It limits the amount of statements you have to send out. You're managing the expectation from the get-go. So this is some very simple language that you can use. Now, before you're talking about treatment and patients out of pockets, which, by the way, if you have the accurate insurance breakdown and you have your fee schedules up to date, then you can give them an accurate out-of-pocket. If you don't have an accurate breakdown and you don't have your fee schedules up to date, then you're not going to be able to give them an accurate out-of-pocket. And then you should probably talk to someone like Teresa to get all that stuff in order, right? But before the treatment coordinator is talking about the out-of-pocket cost, it works best if there's a handoff from clinical to the front. Now, in my workshop, I go over all the different types of handoffs. And the worst handoff is basically when a patient is sent from the back to the front, and the patient is just sent out there with no explanation of what they need or why they need it, and the patient just shows up and they said, okay, well, I guess I need to come back. And the person at the front is just kind of fumbling and figuring out, you know, okay, well, what do you need? And okay, I guess you need a crown, right? So that's a really ineffective handoff. Now, a really good treatment coordinator, they can make up for that, right? They can pull things together and they can get it, you know, they know why the doctor diagnosed what they need and they can do all that stuff, but it's not ideal and it doesn't really create a lot of confidence in the patient. The ideal handoff, which is actually needs to be orchestrated, is that the doctor is handing off the patient to the treatment coordinator in front of the patient. Now, this has to be orchestrated. So in some offices, it works better that they have the treatment coordinator come back and the doctor does a little bit of a handoff in front of the patient. In some offices, the patient may go to a consult room. In our office, we put them in a consult room because we have 4 operatories and the patients are moving really fast and we need to turn over that room. So the patient sits in a consult room, the doctor comes in, does a little handoff, the treatment coordinator is right there. So this is what I do with clients is I orchestrate how this happens. Some offices, they have a dedicated room just for consults. So the doctor comes into that room, they're doing the whole exam in there, doctor comes in, treatment coordinator's in there, doctor does his exam, treatment coordinator's there, hand it off, patient never leaves, just stays right there. The bottom line is that I know that when there is a formal handoff from the doctor to the treatment coordinator, case acceptance is exponentially higher. Why? Because what happens if you don't is that patient from the back to the front gets amnesia. They forget about what the doctor said, they forget about what they needed and why they needed it. And then you're set up front just like, okay, well, I guess I'll talk to you later about that. So patient handoff is a critical step in increasing case acceptance, and that has to be organized in a custom way for every office based on the way it's laid out and how your patients flow. So some of the benefits is that it creates trust between the clinical, the patient, and the front office. It's just plain good patient service. It makes them feel like they're cared for. It's a trust transfer. It's a handoff so that the person feels like they're being paid attention to. And this dramatically increases case acceptance when done correctly and consistently. Consistently is the challenging part because as staff moves around, you know, right now we're currently having an issue with dental assistants. So as the clinical team gets stretched a little thin, things get shortcutted, and sometimes the handoff can get shortcutted, right? So just because that happens, you just got to put it back together and keep that process going because it works. So what's the biggest obstacle to a patient handoff? Well, the biggest obstacle is that the clinical is not coordinated with the front office. You know, you can have a morning huddle, and in the morning huddle, you should be going over who's going to be getting a consult. That's one way to do it. A lot of offices that I work with and what we use, even though it's a 1,500 square foot office, is we use radios. And when there's a consult in Op 4, the assistant in Op 4 says there's a consult in Op 4 to the front, and that's alerting them that there's going to be a consult. Now, if the treatment coordinator knows there was a new patient back there, they're expecting it. But a lot of times, if they're popping up out of hygiene or running double column of hygiene, they're not going to be expecting that. So they need to be alerted so they're getting ready to receive and get that handoff. So step 3 here is what I call 3 steps in emotionally engaging case presentation, how to quickly help the patient own their dental problems so they express a desire to fix it, all right? So I want to talk a little bit about the #1 mistake that dentists make when presenting treatment. Now, to a salesman, a trained professional salesman, this is sales 101. And what I mean by that is when you're selling somebody something, the thing you're supposed to do first is understand what the patient or what your prospect needs and wants and why they want it, and then see if your product or service will fit their needs. Well, in dentistry, that's not usually the way it's done. Patient comes in, they get examined by the doctor, they look at the x-rays, and the patient will say, you need a crown, you need a root canal, you need an implant, because the patient's saying, well, doc, well, what do I do? And that works about 20 to 30% of the time, where the doctor will just do whatever the doctor says because it's the doctor. But that's not a way to have high case acceptance. So that's also the way that the patient has amnesia when they go up front, by the way. So the number one mistake that the doctor makes is that they're discussing treatment options before the patient owns the consequence of their diagnosis. And I'm going to go over exactly what this means and how you fix it. So the incorrect way to present treatment is to say, you need a crown, you need a root canal, I would recommend an implant, and on and on. We do second opinions in our office, and a patient will come in for a second opinion on an implant, and we'll go over the x-rays with them, and the patient will get their treatment options, and they'll say, you mean I have another option other than an implant? The doctor never told me that. And the reason why the doctor never told him that, because he gave him what I call, or I have a client call, you need an implant, right? Because doc just went to a course and learned how to place implants, so you have a missing tooth, so you need an implant, right? That's not really making the patient own the problem. So the correct way is to make the patient aware of the consequence of inaction and get the patient to ask you for a solution if this infection goes untreated, right? So as an example, let's go back to the implant example. So you have a missing tooth. A missing tooth has how many treatment options? Depending on where it is in their mouth, 4. The first treatment option for every procedure is none. Don't do anything. That is a treatment option. Then for a missing tooth, the second option would be a partial. The second one would be a bridge, and then the first one would be an implant. So they have 4 treatment options. Now, which one is the most expensive and takes the longest? The implant. Which one is probably the best? The implant. Which one costs the most? The implant, right? So what is the problem? What is the consequences of not replacing the missing tooth? Well, now if the patient already knows and understands that because they've had an implant before and they don't want any missing teeth, and they know that their bone is going to atrophy, and they know that their teeth are going to shift, and they know that their bite is going to shift and they're going to lose more teeth, and they already understand the consequences, then they're just going to want the implant. But what about a person that has never had an implant or a bridge or never had a missing tooth, right? And you say, well, you need an implant, and they go out front and they find out it's going to be $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. And oh yeah, by the way, you don't have implant coverage. Well, they're going to say it's too expensive, and they're going to walk out and they're going to do nothing, right? So the very first thing that you need to do is make sure that the patient understands the diagnosis and that they own the problem. And the problem they have is missing tooth, and that missing tooth has consequences. And that problem has multiple solutions, right? People don't buy solutions, they want to fix problems, right? It just so happens that the solution is an implant, right? So the number one mistake that doctors make, the treatment coordinators make, is they spend too much time talking about treatment and not enough time talking about the problem. And it's not that you have to spend a lot of time on this, you just have to make sure that patient owns the problem before you get into expensive and time-consuming solutions. Because if you do it this way and you do it correctly, the only question will be not if they want the treatment, but how are they going to be able to afford the treatment? Because if you are getting the financial objection too much, it's not that they can't afford it, it's that they don't agree with it. Because even people that can't afford it, literally, like they don't have the money or they get denied financing, if they really own that problem, they will find a way to figure it out and they will come up with the money some of the time. If they don't own the problem, they will come up with the problem none of the time, never. So the number one mistake is talking to the patient about treatment before they own the problem. And in my training, I go over all the different diagnoses that you can have and how you talk to the patient about this. And when we do the training, we drill it, we role play it, we practice it. Because what we're trying to do is change the way the doctors think and speak. Because they're thinking with, I see a problem, this is how you fix it. I see a problem, this is how you fix it. But they're not involving the patient enough in that process. And if you're already doing that, great. If you have high case acceptance, you're doing this. I didn't invent this concept. This is just the way that it is, right? So everything after this becomes much easier if the doctor does this part. If the doctor doesn't do this, then the treatment coordinator has to pick it up. A strong treatment coordinator can make up for a weak doctor. A strong doctor can make up for a weak treatment coordinator. Weak doctor, weak treatment coordinator, low case acceptance. So let's talk about the pre-consultation interview. So the patient is coming into the office. You know, usually the first thing you do when they come into the office, they fill out a bunch of paperwork and then they go back and then you start taking x-rays and charting their existing dentistry and talking about what they think their problem is, right? What's their chief complaint? What are they here for, right? Well, there's a little bit more to it that we want to know. So before you do an exam, you should sit down and should ask the patient in some way, shape, or form some more probing questions. And these questions kind of get into the head and the heart of the patient. And when we're doing this, we're actually qualifying the patient for ideal dentistry. And when we're looking at qualifying, we want to know what their attitude is, what their willingness is to get ideal dentistry, and generally what their purchasing power is. Now, if the patient is just coming in for a routine cleaning, this is not a big deal. If the patient is coming in because they have major dental work they need to get done, and they're coming in for an implant consult, they're coming in because they have a lot of dental problems, this is when this becomes critical, right? Because we need to understand why this patient is here, what their fears are, what their objections are potentially, and in the case of implants or a full mouth reconstruction in some way, shape, or form, do they have any financial concerns? Do they have any budget in mind, right? It is not any fun for anyone when a patient comes in and says they want implants, you work up a $50,000 treatment plan for them, and the patient runs away screaming because that's twice the price of their car, right? Because the patient didn't really understand what it is that they were asking for, right? So we get into how you do this process in the training so that when you're doing your exam and you're going over treatment options, it's matching what the patient's expectations are. It doesn't mean that we don't go over treatment options that they can't, that are out of their price range just because we think they don't have money. We're not trying to diagnose their pocketbook. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about making sure that the patient knows what it is that they're here for. And then when we go over the x-rays, we can do a comprehensive treatment plan, and they're going to be comfortable receiving that because we know what it is that they need and want. And they're here for a comprehensive treatment plan. They're not just here because they want to get one tooth fixed. So pre-COVID-19, we'd always try to do this face-to-face. Now we're using some forms to fill out to get this information so that we don't have to spend as much time with the person face-to-face, but nonetheless, we still want to know what's going on with their head and their heart before we go over any clinical options with the patient.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jim real quick. Sorry to interrupt. We do have questions coming in. I just want to let the audience know that we've reserved. Jeff is coming to a conclusion here, and we do have about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. Just wanted to let everyone know. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I'm right on time. So the new patient scheduling script that increases new patient show rate and marketing ROI. So let's talk about that. Step number 1. So having a script, having a process is really about control. And in a dental office or in a sales process, we want to walk the patient down a certain path. And the number one mistake that I see on the phone is that when a patient calls in and is asking a question about price, or asking if you do a particular procedure, or asking if they can have a particular appointment time, the typical knee-jerk reaction of the person on the phone is to answer the question. Now, the moment you start answering the question that they asked you, you begin to lose control. It doesn't mean that you don't answer the person's question. It just means that when they start asking questions, you need to begin to take control of that conversation. And the way that you start controlling the conversation is by asking the patient questions. So if the patient calls up and says, so I see that you do implants. How much is an implant? So a good response to that could be, well, that's a great question. I'd be happy to answer that for you. Has another doctor diagnosed you needing an implant? Now, this is a tactic that it cannot be just rotely done. This is a skill that someone needs to practice. And you don't always naturally have these skills. And in some dental offices, they take people that have no training and they're the lowest paid employees and they stick them on the front desk to answer the phone, and it's a big mistake. Because you're basically taking your toughest people, your new patients, and you're expecting them to answer these people's questions. And they need some training on how to do that. And so I have a script, and I have some free training that I actually have on my YouTube page where this is the training, this is how you do it. And then the person answering the phone needs feedback. We record the conversations, we give them feedback, we do role playing with them, because patients are just going to ask the same types of questions. And if they don't get the answer they want, they're just going to hang up and go on to somewhere else. So the whole idea on the phone call is to just begin to take control of the conversation so that you can take them down the path that will ultimately help them get the care that they need, which they're only going to get by coming into a dental office. And thank gosh, we still have to do that in the office. You don't have to do that virtually. So if you want that script, which I have, I'm going to give you my email at the end here. You can email me. I'll send you the script. I'll send you the training. Right? It's something that every office should have, and it will give your front desk a system that they can follow that helps them to schedule more new patients and gets a better ROI on your marketing dollars. So before I end off here, I'm just going to play a minute-long video here. This is Brian. I did some training a couple of years ago with an office, doctors that owned 14 Aspen offices. And Aspen has a sales process, but he's going to share with you what it is that I did that helps them to improve their sales process. And after the training, their case acceptance rate went up by 30%.
I'm Brian Green, a regional manager over at Aspen. Coming into this course, when Dr. Miguel told me about us getting Jeff Palmer's course to be coaching our doctors and our clinicians and then our treatment plan coordinators on their treatment, I was a little skeptical. In all reality, Aspen, we've been developing a system for a very long time, working with our doctors, our coordinators, how to get treatment taken care of, take care of the patients, taking the care they deserve. Walking into this treatment though, or this course, this seminar, it's really been incredible. It's the difference in just the paradigms that we're talking about with our teams, especially with our clinicians. Talking about this Jotel asking how to really get the patient's involvement as far as what they want to do, and as far as getting their kind of dedication to their treatment, getting them bought in is going to be huge, because that's been a piece that we've always put on our coordinators versus our clinicians. And when the clinicians do it, we're going to see a major shift with what our patients are able to say yes to. I'm really excited what we have to offer and what the results are going to be from this course, and I'm sure we'll be sharing results in the future as well.
So the concepts that I go over, as I said before, are simple, but they're not easy to execute. And we've been inundated with webinars and information over the past few months, and there is no shortage of information out there. And if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's put out by the Covey Institute, which Stephen Covey with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the beginning of the book, it poses the question, what's more difficult, coming up with the strategy or getting it executed? And a majority of the people say getting it executed. We can all have great ideas, right? We can all chase the shiny objects, but the real results are in getting something done. And the real enemy of getting things done is what's called the whirlwind. You know, we go away for a seminar, we watch a webinar, and the whirlwind is what happens when we start back into that office Monday morning, and you hit the ground running, because everything that you always have to do just to keep the office running is the whirlwind, and it's not bad. But the only way that you're going to get something done is by taking time out of the office and dedicating some serious energy to shifting that momentum. So one of the things that I've built into my training is the 4 disciplines of execution, because when you implement these steps over a period of weeks and then months, sometimes it literally takes days or weeks for this to change. But when you implement this, it does work, because there's discipline in how we do that. And it's explained, the principles are explained in detail in the 4 disciplines of execution. So there's 3 different ways that I do training. I do have video training that is available on my website. It has 10 video lessons. It goes over in detail all the steps that I've gone over with you here. It's the same training that I've been delivering for years, but it's updated as things change. And you can train as many people as you want, and you have access to it forever, as long as I'm around. And you also get CEU credits when you finish it, and that's for $1,500. Right now, I don't have any 2-day live events scheduled. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I am doing on-site training. So I have a year-long mentorship that I do with offices that it's the right thing for. So if they want to have me come to the office and train their team and help them to implement it in their office, that's what I can do. If you just want to chat with me and find out, you know, if there's something that I can help you with, or you have a few questions, you can go to my office and set up a strategy session, or you can just text me. That's my cell phone number, and we can set up a time to talk. So Jim?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for a really comprehensive, super comprehensive program. Do you have a slide that has your email address, or where you can put
I can
in
put
the chat?
that in the, how about I put that in the chat, right?
Okay. I'm going to turn it back to Teresa here, but thank you so much for a really comprehensive program.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And so I did have a question for you. With the role playing that you're suggesting, is there a game plan on how often we should do this? Are you thinking once a month as needed? Do you have a formula for that?
Well, there's reality, and then there's ideal, right? So when I have some role playing, and I also have something that are called drills. And so the drills basically are, I have all the steps of the process written out where they kind of review that with each other. In our office, what we do is we set it up to do that once a week, and then they'll do that for about 8 or 10 weeks, and the numbers will really get going, and then it kind of, you know, they get really busy, and then it falls off, and then we do it again, right? So ideally, you're getting together every week and going over this until it becomes a habit, right? It's like,
right.
How long does it take to create muscle memory, right? Some say it takes 30 days to change a habit, right? But you'd have to be doing that every day for 30 days, which is, you know, that's not always realistic for people, right? So we do it ideally every week, and I have a program with my private coaching clients where I'll put them on this role-playing thing where they'll do that every week. And when they do that, they get results, right? But a lot of times what happens is they get stuck in the whirlwind, right? And they get busy. And then we go back and we look at the numbers, say, okay, well, let's review this and let's do some role-playing again, right? So.
Well, and role-playing is always not fun the first couple times you do it. It's just not fun. And then the more, you know, you see the results from it, you really see it start to pay off. So if you're one of those that's going, oh no, I'm not doing any role play, just hang in there. It really, really does work. So, and it is way more fun when you're leading the exercise than if you're sitting there having to do the role play. So that's always a good reason to be the leader of the role play. So thank you again, Jeff. Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Teresa and Jeff, we do have one question before we turn it over to Dan. And Jeff, this question is about like telehealth and teledentistry and case presentation. And the viewer is, wondering how you've coached offices to adapt to, because this listener mentioned that some of their patients are not coming in, and they're doing virtual consults. So what do you recommend as, how do you tailor your presentation skills for like virtual dentistry?
Great question. And we actually signed up for a telehealth program to do some virtual consults when this all started, and sent out an email and put it on our website and put it on our Google My Business page, and we had like 0 takers. So I'd be more than happy to do that, but the process is the same, meaning, okay, you're going to have to do some type of diagnosis, which you may or may not be able to do, via the video screen or a picture, and it's still find out what they need and want. And then if you can, how can you get them to own that problem and then fix it, right? The process is really the same, except you're doing it with limited diagnostics. A big part of the step 3 of helping the patient to own their problem is going over with them x-rays and photographs. So
Right.
Ideally, if you can get some type of photo, or at least, if you're on video, kind of look, that would be the way that you would apply it. And also you can do the screening questions. The screening questions are still the same, I have an emergency or limited exam screening question that's a little bit different than the comp exam screening questions, right?
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. I appreciate it. Sorry, Teresa, didn't mean to step on your sentence. Why don't you introduce Dan, and we'll transition into the quick demonstration here.
It's never a bother. Don't worry about it. Okay, so thank you again, Jeff. Appreciate that. And definitely get in touch with Jeff and take advantage of his offering. And now we're going to bring on Dan Hall, who's my favorite CareStack techie. He is going to show you what you can do with some of the software. And we understand if some of you need to get back to your offices, but I would love it if you could stay and watch, Dan. Thank you.
I appreciate the introduction, Teresa. Thanks for making me your favorite tech person at CareStack. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to share my screen. I'll jump in here. This kind of builds off of.
Hey, and Dan, Jeff, you might have to stop presenting your screen. Thank you.
Okay.
There we go. Great. Thanks.
Jim, can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we see great. Yep.
Perfect. We took a lot of feedback from our users as well. And, a little different than what Jeff was talking about is we were getting feedback on, the traditional treatment plan and just how it was clunky and it looked like a algebraic equation more so than like, hey, here's why you need the treatment and the diagnosis behind it. So we had information and we built a case presentation tool. So I'm going to show that and just build it from a traditional treatment plan that you can see on my screen here inside of CareStack. So if I jump in here and I build this and say, let's build an actual case report. I'm going to choose my conditions. In this case, I have a missing tooth and caries. We'll continue on here. It is going to build a case report in a kind of a traditional format and take my equation, but we'll go down and we're going to send this to the patient. So this way we can do it even while they're in the clinic. And this, alleviates the pressure of having devices for people to sign, because we can send it right to, say, Jim's mobile phone while he's sitting in the chair and talk about this and review it with the patient. So we'll send a copy. This is showing an email version of it. They can review that case. It goes through some verification. So we'll just kind of jump ahead on this. And here's what it puts together for the treatment. Because again, like Teresa introduced me as a techie, I get in this dork mode sometimes where I'm throwing around acronyms about technology and I get these blank looks on people's faces via Zoom. And I think that might happen in the dental office as well too. Like hygienists and doctors, they talk about caries and all these terms that the layperson may not understand. So in the case, we built it out where we're gonna have picture here so you can see the visual of what's happening, right? The tooth that's missing, or maybe it's an intraoral image that's been posted in there, and then a description of like what caries actually is and what it means to the patient. And then if we continue our way down here, we can see, you know, impacted food and all that, how it's going to impact it. And we can see our proposed treatment, right? So we have a dental cleaning here. And again, there would be an image of like, what does that look like to the patient? And what does it mean to have that done? Or like the root canal example below it. So they can have a good understanding of like what they're coming in for and how it relates back above to the issue, right? Because like Jeff was saying, they're not going to buy the solution. They're going to want to fix what the problem is, or the root pain or future pain, right? Is what they want to resolve. So if we go down, we can see the solutions here to that issue. And then we present the monetary side of it in a more patient-friendly fashion. We still have, you know, the term here with a code, and we just give it a simple breakdown: insurance side, patient side, total cost. And it does break it down by phase, right? Here's phase 1, here's our phase 2, and then there's my total treatment. Now, if this were something where the patient had gotten this, maybe they wanted to go home, talk it over with their spouse, they can sign it after the fact, or they could be sitting in the chair. Like I said, Jim's in the chair. You could sign from the chair and not have to worry about touching a shared tablet or clipboard in the clinic. So they could capture signature on it, confirm it. But if they're doing it from home, it also takes them to a call to action, right? You've signed that treatment plan. Now let's book the appointment so they can jump in. So now it's another leap. They're committed. They can move forward with that treatment versus just letting it hang out there. That's the case presentation that we wanted to show during CareStack. We didn't want to make it a big CareStack commercial. I know we're sponsoring these events, and mainly we want you to walk away with good content from subject matter experts like Jeff on how to boost your case acceptance. I appreciate everybody's time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Jim, I don't know if there's any questions that popped up.
They're not, but just closing thoughts. I want to thank Jeff Palmer again for this presentation today. Really, I think they're actionable pearls that you can take back to your practice. So thank you so much, Teresa, Duncan. Thank you for facilitating and moderating. And we wish everyone to stay healthy and safe. Number one thing is that you're from us, from CareStack, you're going to receive a follow-up email with a link to this recording. So if you want to watch it again, you'll have access to it. It will be hosted on our website too as well, under the resources section. If you want to learn more from Jeff Palmer, he's put up his email address in the chat, jeff@caseacceptanceacademy.com. So please email him. If you want to learn more about CareStack, go to our website and book a demo. We really appreciate everyone's time. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.